Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Diana Sinton. I'm the Executive Director of UCGIS, and welcome to our session this afternoon. This is one part of our ongoing Symposium 2020 programming activities. If things were different in the world, we all might be in Hawaii right now for this session, but instead you are listening from the comfort of somewhere else, perhaps. We're going to get started in a moment. Just as a reminder, the GoToWebinar system has you muted as an attendee. We would love to have questions from you for our panelists, and feel free to type something into the question space. You can access that from the little question mark icon, and we'll be monitoring those and do our best to have a time towards the end for our panelists to respond to those questions. We're going to wait another 30 seconds or so before we get started because people are still coming in actively right now. This GoToWebinar platform is unfamiliar to many of your computers, those of you who use Zoom on a regular basis, so you now know about that one-time plugin, and just a little slight delay for some people getting started with the technology. We're also going to be creative with all of our activity this afternoon. At least one of our presenters is having some technical difficulties being able to connect. So we are going to rely on the consummate expertise, professionalism and expertise of the remaining panelists to make sure that all of this information is shared as smoothly and professionally as possible. And perhaps with that, I will turn it over to one of the presenters, Anthony Robinson from Penn State University, and he is going to lead this activity today. Anthony, thanks very much. It's all yours.
Thanks a lot, Diana. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're having a reasonable afternoon amidst multiple layers of chaos and calamity. So we'll do our best today to maybe provide a bit of a diversion and think about something else for a little bit of time. This session is about education in the context of GI science and finding a balance between online and face-to-face experiences. Something that when Justine, who is the person who really drove the development of the session, Justine Blanford, when we started putting this together, you know, we were really thinking about all the challenges ongoing with helping people engage in lifelong learning in GI science. And unfortunately, Justine's not able to actually moderate today because she just moved to the Netherlands and is having a little bit of technical issues. So I'm pinch hitting for her, but this is really something that was led by her. So we will begin today with two short talks by some recent students of ours at Penn State, Laura Harding and Mark Prettyman, who are going to talk about their experiences in developing spatial data science research with various forms of distance participation while doing their Penn State studies. After they're finished, I will give a really short wrap up about some of the things we do at Penn State with online learning, completely online learning, and reflect a little bit about what's been going on in crisis mode for the last few months. Guido Cervone is also going to talk a little bit about supervising at a distance, what that means to be an advisor, and then we'll have lots of time for questions, hopefully. So start thinking of those now, both for our students and for those of us who engage on the faculty side. So I see that Laura Harding did join in now, and we were thinking right before this, and she wasn't here yet, that we might start with Mark Prettyman. But let's go ahead and kick it over to Laura if that might work. I'm going to make you presenter now, Laura, and you can go ahead and share your slides, okay?
Okay, thank you. Please let me know if you're able to see my screen. I'm sorry I have not been able to make the video connect for some reason. So
fine.
Can you see the screen now?
We don't see it yet.
Yeah, I don't think so. Oh, yeah.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. Let me just slide this so I can put it into presenter mode for us. All right, thank you very much for the introduction. Which scene are you seeing, the full presentation mode or the notes slide?
We've got the slide, the main slide.
The main slide, fantastic. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss a snapshot of some of my research. I'm very passionate about this research, and I'm also thankful for the opportunity to explain my experience of working while pursuing graduate work. Before I begin, I really want to acknowledge and thank the individuals that have helped and partnered in this endeavor. They've come from many different areas. Our Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab, which is a sister laboratory. Of course, Penn State University, where I did my graduate work. National Center for Atmospheric Research, we were able to travel out there, work with several individuals out there, and they were instrumental in developing me as a scientist in addition to the analog ensemble technique. Also, Dr. Luca Della Monica, who is now out at UC San Diego and was formerly at NCAR. And I can never go without saying a special thanks to my dissertation committee and Dr. Schiavone, who is on this presentation call, and he was instrumental in all of this. Without further ado, we'll move into the topic. So first and foremost, I wanted to give an introduction and a motivation why we take a look at uncertainty. Then I wanted to explain my dissertation research. There were 3 components to it: optimal predictor weighting with an analog ensemble, search space extension, which creates a new technique for filling in a lack of temporal information by using spatial information, and then spatiotemporal reconstruction technique. We will focus specifically on the search space extension just for this talk to give you a snippet of the research that I'm so passionate about. And then also we'll talk about how balancing work, school, and home really came into play. So without further ado, let me move into why we are interested in uncertainty, and why I myself have always been interested in uncertainty. So numerical weather prediction, the goal of it is to forecast the future state of the atmosphere using physical models with initial conditions. This is computationally expensive. It's very challenging because the atmosphere is a chaotic system. I am particularly interested in this because I think the knowledge and the application of that uncertainty information is critical to so many decision areas, risk-informed decision-making. With my own job specifically, it will relate to humanitarian assistance, disaster response, and it will also relate to military-oriented needs. Numerical weather prediction can break into 2 classes. We'll do a real quick overview on those. If I can get this to click on. There we go. We have deterministic predictions, and we also have ensemble forecast prediction. So a deterministic prediction provides one potential future state of the atmosphere, while ensemble models, shown on the right-hand side here, provide a range of possible future states of the atmosphere, as you can see indicated by each of those individual squares with individual separate forecasts. On the left-hand side, we see just a single, and that lacks uncertainty information, whereas on the right-hand side, we have those range of possibilities. So for one future forecast, we have an array of options, and this gives us an understanding of uncertainty. The mean of the ensemble is also shown in the bottom right corner, which is also helpful and useful to us. Generating ensemble predictions also requires running multiple models, and this is computationally expensive. It's very helpful and attractive because we don't know which model is the best to run, as there's uncertainty in the model and the initial conditions. But running these models is, again, computationally expensive. Another way is to actually use the analog ensemble technique, which I'll walk into next and explain how it works. And this technique is able to use a single deterministic model, but it's computationally efficient and able to provide us that understanding of uncertainty. So what is the analog ensemble technique? First and foremost, let's define what is a weather analog. A weather analog is a similar past occurrence to the present. And here we're going to use the technique and create a sample 4-member analog ensemble. So we have a current deterministic prediction is indicated by the black square. Historical repositories corresponding forecast and observation. We use a similarity metric defined here on the right-hand side. And in essence, you can just think of this for now as a minimization. So we're finding the smallest difference between a multivariate vector at the black square and a multivariate vector at each of the different past occurrences in the historical repository of deterministic multivariate predictions. So we compare them using the similarity metric, and to create a four-member ensemble, we find the most similar, the lowest value for that similarity metric. We take up these four blue squares as they're most similar. We find the corresponding observations. We use those corresponding observations, bring them together, and that provides us our analog ensemble. This analog ensemble helps us eliminate model bias, because if a model tends to behave in error or behave well in a certain area, it's typically going to have a systematic bias to it, and we can account for some of that. There are also other benefits to this technique as well. But I'd like to move us into the search space extension. So this analog ensemble technique we just talked about is at one point in space over a small time window. The historical repository that was indicated by those long lines in the left-hand side, it's critical to the technique's performance. And so part of my dissertation was understanding if geospatial nearest neighbor concepts could be used to develop a way of expanding the historical search space. And we were able to explore this, utilize nearest neighbors, and find that this is actually something that can help us out. So say we have a data set where instead of having a year or 2 years worth of information, we only have 6 months of information, or something along those lines. We can use the red square as the target, the actual location that we are trying to forecast for. We can expand the historical repository by using the repositories of the neighboring locations. So I have deterministic multivariate predictions at each of those squares, and I have the corresponding observations. So I can explore those historical repositories. Let's take a quick look at the data set that we used to explore this. We were fortunate to get data courtesy of NCAR from ECMWF, a 3-year data set covering the Italian domain that you see pictured on the right-hand side. This resolution was about 1/4 degree resolution. We had 48-hour lead time at 3 forecast hours. And we used the ECMWF analysis fields as our observational data set. So the first thing I'm going to show you is actual and implementation of the search space extension. This is sample output. So note that you'll see the red dots are still those target sites that we were trying to forecast for. The blue squares around it are those that have actually been deemed using the similarity metric and the search space extension process to be applicable to that target site. So this is saying I have run my analog ensemble, I have compared it at those neighboring sites to find which potential past analogs are most similar to the present, and then I have used those at those exact sites. Note that when you see a spot that is surrounding the red that just has the gray dot, that site did not have a selection, did not have a most similar past occurrence, did not have an analog. And so this is actual output of what was actually chosen and actually used. And these are just a few examples here of the output. So we move on to an extremely short historical repository. I just wanted to show you one sample with the time that we have here today before we move on to some of the work concepts and tying things together. We tested the limit of the concept, and we said, if we have a very short repository, say we only have 1 month's worth of data at this new site, but we want to be able to provide uncertainty in our forecast at that site. We were able to find that based upon root mean square error comparisons in this specific analysis shown on this figure, The y-axis is root mean square error. The x-axis is days out. The days moving forward here are January, February, and March of 2015. The 1 month historical repository that's used is January of 2013. And we're able to see that the green line, using the 1 month search space extension, performs better than the search space extension using a 2-year search. And both of these perform better than the ECMWF, which is indicated by the gray line. So moving on, that's just one snippet of one aspect of my dissertation. How did this work with work and school at the same time? So I just put a little short timeline in here. I started in 2014 as a part of the ERDIC long-term training program. This is a competitive educational opportunity within the Department of the Army. It's a phenomenal opportunity. It allows you your very first year to go and do and focus on all coursework and reduces your office responsibilities to about 10%. So when you're getting started, while the the government fiscal year is ending through the end of September, you're still finishing projects, but then you get to focus on your research and your classes and figuring out what your dissertation topics are going to be. The following summer in 2015, our advisor created these amazing opportunities where we were able to work with the individuals out at National Center for Atmospheric Research for the entire summer. That was a phenomenal experience, and our entire laboratory learned a vast amount of information through those experiences. In August 2015, I resumed normal work duties on a new team and a new project. That was extremely exhausting and very interesting. I had a whole new set of projects to learn. My project team actually had about 15 sub-projects, and I had to learn to brief all those projects, and then I was working on 3 of them. So it meant that I had my dissertation topic plus 3 other research projects at work. I also began a weekly commute. So every Wednesday I would commute from Pennsylvania to Washington, D.C. That became very tiring over the years. In the summer of 2016, a bonus was we still got to go and work some at NCAR. A challenge when you're working is that you have to use vacation time in order to do some of those things. Some other people might have a few more options than that. It was a great opportunity, but you also need to balance with family. And as family needs, I was the primary breadwinner. In October of 2016, I was able to get a basic research effort funded that had overlap with my dissertation topic, a significant amount of overlap. This was phenomenal in the fact that I was able to use work time, which before I was not allowed, and I really couldn't use work time towards my dissertation work. So it was all evenings and weekends, but now I could overlap the two, and it just doubled your amount of time that you had to be able to work on things. In February 2017, I had the opportunity to a visiting scientist position at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. The day that I got in the car to leave for NCAR was also the day that I found out I was pregnant with our little girl. She was born, so it was an awesome opportunity. I was out there in Colorado for 6 months, had the majority of my pregnancy out there, found new doctors, all while working at NCAR. And the scientists were so supportive, both in what it would look like to be a scientist and a mom, and to do solid research. And I was very fortunate to work under Dr. Sue Ellen Haupt out at NCAR, who is a phenomenal mentor. Our daughter was born in 2017, returned to work in December of 2017. That commute just became too much with a little one. So in August of 2008, we moved back to the DC area, defended and graduated recently in December. So I wanted to make a few quick notes and then move along. It's a challenge juggling multiple in-depth research topics. I found that very challenging. But I also found that in hindsight, and even towards the middle of when I was going through things, I found that I really enjoyed having this wider breadth of subject matter knowledge. It did make it harder to get everything done. You absolutely had plenty of times where you're very overwhelmed because you had multiple bosses. You had an advisor with a dissertation, and I had a very understanding advisor. But you also I had 3 different bosses in my office as well. And along those lines of bosses is managing expectations across the board. There was no way to avoid times where I had a significant amount of deadlines coincident at the same time, but there were other times that we were able to distribute them in a more according manner. Family is critical, and their support is critical in the process. So hopefully maybe our conversation in the panel can chat some of those things. Some of my advice would be, you see there are 2 summary bullets on the research there, and you could read those, but some of my advice would be balancing work and school. It is absolutely challenging, but it's so worth it. Your advisor matters because your advisor will be with you the entire process. And I was fortunate to have a really amazing advisor through the process. Your family is also very important in that they're supportive of this. So thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura. So this is a great example of a success story when it comes to working at a distance on a complex project and trying to balance all the different career and family related needs with research and GI science. And so now I'm going to move over to Mark Prettyman, who's one of our completely online MGIS graduates. And I will share his slideshow here in a second. And I'm going to drive for him today because we were having some issues with getting it to show up clearly a little bit ago. So let me switch over here to, I think Diana, I might need you to allow, there we go. Yep. Perfect. All right. So take it away, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everyone. As Anthony said, my name is Mark Prettyman. I'm a recent MGIS graduate. Today, I'll be talking to you about my MGIS journey. And as I say, it's been from the comfort of my home office where I'm at right now, as we most are. Next, please. So I'll talk to you a little bit about who I am, what my career has been with the state of Delaware, why I chose Penn State, and something which Laura mentioned, the work life and college balance, and how you really have to figure out how to balance those to make things effective. I'll discuss a little bit about the capstone project that I had, also under the direction of Dr. Savone, and the opportunities it's afforded me. All right, next, please. So I've been with the state of Delaware now for a little over 18 years. I've been an environmental scientist there. I graduated in 2000 with a degree in chemistry. Knew I wanted to become a scientist in the state of Delaware shortly thereafter, and I've loved every minute of it. Currently, I'm the lead scientist on projects related to ground level ozone, basically trying to help ensure that everyone in the state of Delaware and the East Coast can breathe very well. I started as an entry-level scientist, and I've been able to work up to a lead scientist. But of course, there's always more and more to learn, which is one of the reasons why I eventually went into the program. One very important thing to note is that I've actually been telecommuting from home for over 10 years now. Very short story, our office was moving locations, and I went from a larger one to a smaller one. So I really wanted to telecommute for a long term, and this really became a push after working an hour away for 8 years. I raised my hand. I'm like, hey, I'll gladly give up an office if we're moving to a smaller office, and me and a couple other folks were able to do this. So in the past 10 years, I've been able to save like about $1,200 a year in gas, and I've displaced nearly 200,000 miles that I've not driven, by driving 2 hours a day. It's been phenomenal. I can get just as much work done, and as Laura alluded to again, having a supportive family and being around family is important as well. I really appreciate being able to wake up with my wife, have coffee, do things around the house, start my job, and then at the end of the day, it's a matter of going from one office to the other and being done. I've told others that there's the old song, anything you can do, I can do better, and I kind of relate that to my job. I can do anything that my coworkers in the office can do, but I can do it better because I'm kind of at home in my pajamas almost half the time. So it's been a great time being able to work from home. Now, as far as the GIS aspect, I really became very interested in it early in my career. I took a lot of GIS courses available through our department, and I would make maps every now and then, but I kind of felt that I was being a little underutilized. I wanted to know more about what I could do with GIS and what more I could do to help my office. So between wanting to kind of advance myself and advance my studies, I began to look into an online course to learn more. Right? Next, please. So when I began looking online, over and over and over again, Penn State University kept popping up in my online searches. I'm like, okay, well, let's look further into that. I reviewed the program. I reviewed the classes. The classes looked great. The classes had everything I wanted as far as learning very in-depth information into how to use GIS software, both say Esri programs, but also open source software as well. I really wanted to learn more about how to program, and the program had a way to go really in depth into the program side of it. Being online, it was a win-win for me, being someone who has telecommuted from home for 10 years. The course schedule was their 10-week courses. I thought that was very appropriate, and I was able to get, or I could get 5 courses a year into my studies. It was very structured but self-paced. It promoted a lot of independent usage, but as I even found out, you have your advisor or your instructor and all of your other classmates there with you at any time. So it really made it a great environment to learn. When I started looking into it, I had sent Anthony an initial email, and he referred me to a couple of other staff and instructors. I spoke with them. I was put in contact with a couple folks in the state of Delaware who graduated from the MGIS program, including a friend who works within our Department of Agriculture. It really sealed the deal for me. There was no other program that I really wanted to go into, and I signed up there in the fall of 2017. Next, please. So as far as my studies, as I said, work, life, and college, you really have to find a balance between them. I had found a good work-life balance after telecommuting for so long, but then I had to throw in something new in there, the college. And one of the best ways I found was to really figure out how to make things overlap to what works. Me being from an air quality background, I tried to ensure that a lot of the information that I was learning, I could devote to an air quality issue. In many of my classes and the projects, I would use ambient air quality data or emissions data to help create the project and share it with my managers back in the office. And it really helped to ensure that I wasn't trying to put 2 and 2 together that made no sense to me. If I was doing water quality, I'm sure there's tons of ways you can use GIS and water quality. For me, air quality, it was a perfect overlap to ensure that what I was learning, I could absolutely and 100% use in my day-to-day job. But of course, self-discipline is another thing that I wanted to be sure that I was taking into consideration. They're, again, weekly courses. You get instructions and you move forward with it on your own, but you can't wait until the very last day to work out. Even with something that I found to be easy, it's best to ensure that you have time and budget the time, because you never know what's going to pop up in life. There's always going to be something that can prevent you from working, and it's just good sense to ensure that you're putting as much effort in as you possibly can ahead of time, because you never know what life is going to throw at you. The next bullet I say is something that I've really focused on with a lot of other folks I've talked about, is that sometimes it's hard and sometimes it's challenging. And I don't really mean that they're the same thing. There can be something that's hard. Personally, I find writing to be hard. I'm very meticulous when I write. Frankly, I'd rather be crunching numbers all day long than write a report. But in terms of this program, I found it challenging. It was challenging to me in that sometimes I didn't know something, especially when it came to the programming. But the programming was something that once it started to click, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. This is something that I can use, and it's very interesting. It was a challenge to get there, but I felt very accomplished once I learned it, and then I could utilize it both for the studies and for my job. And again, just to reiterate, with the work, life, and college balance, you use what you know. If you are a data scientist, you have a lot of data. Me being an air quality specialist, I used air quality. I have a friend in Denmark where I work. They are in water resources. They are using exactly what they know, and they're a student in the MGIS program now. Again, Laura, something that she said, you can't forget about family, and family has to be there for you, and you have to be there for family. So you really have to ensure that you're taking time for yourself so you don't get burnt out. Some nights I just was done. I had to walk away and, sit with my wife, and then we would chat or talk, and, maybe an hour later, I'm like, hey, something was clicking, I'd go right back to it. So you have to make time for them as well. And simply just being active in the course, as I said, is great. So as far as my capstone program, as I said, my advisor was Dr. Savone, and thankfully Laura did a lot of the background work for me in leading up to what it's about, because again, my capstone was based upon the analog ensemble technique from Dr. Luca Dellamoniche. A lot of the work that I did was based upon much of the work from Laura and many of the other students in the program. The analog ensemble technique has been used to show that it can forecast meteorological parameters, solar parameters, and air quality parameters better than equivalent deterministic models. So what I wanted to do was to see if it could forecast day-ahead ozone concentrations better than existing methods, which are basically done by humans. And the program that I used was basically a package that utilized the analog ensemble method and the R statistical model. And it was developed by Wei-Ming Hu, which is another PhD student of Guido's. Right. Next, please. All right, the map on this slide is simply to show the project domain that I had. The various colors of the regions represent forecast regions. And to put it simply, if you look at the blue Delaware polygon, there are actually 7 individual sites that are located there by the green dots. These individual sites are ambient air quality monitors. Every day, either a state agency or a private entity on behalf of the state prepares a day-ahead forecast to help notify the public what they think air quality is going to be the following day. They may take a few shortcuts because, as Laura said, it's very computationally expensive and can take a long time to try to run a computer model, especially if you're doing it every single day. So they do it based on their expertise. I wanted to see if we could do it with the analog ensemble model. In this slide, it shows the air quality index using the calendar plots. This is actual data for Delaware and the calendar plots on the two squares on the right. So simply put, green is good air quality, yellow is bad air quality, orange is really bad air quality. As you can see in the calendar plot on the right, it's actual real data. There's only a few orange days with bad air quality. The official forecast is just to the left of it. That's what we are trying to get better than. But as you can see in the 2 calendar plots on the left-hand side, these are the analog ensemble technique results, or at least just 2 of them. It either was over forecasting and predicting too many days with bad air quality, or it was under predicting with not enough. So although my actual conclusion was a little inconclusive, we definitely want to keep going, and I plan to continue working with Dr. Savone. So here we are now in June. I just graduated last month with my Master of Geographic Information Systems, and I also finished with a graduate certificate for geospatial programming and web map development. I plan on staying with the state of Delaware in the Division of Air Quality. I want to be able to use my newly acquired skills and enhance what I do. And frankly, we have a lot of staff that has left in the last 2 or 3 years due to retirement, which is great for them. But of course, now there is a skills void. So I want to use my skills to try to fill those gaps that they've left. I can definitely visualize data better than I could before. I can create web maps now. And you know, yes, it's still a map, but I can present the data in a much better way to show the public what the data is and why things are happening, and basically create a story with the data. And of course, with my MGIS, I hope to advance my career with the state as well. And then one of the more exciting opportunities that I'll say is that I am fortunate enough to be asked to be a grading assistant for Penn State. I've joined the team for the very introductory course to the MGIS program, which is Making Maps That Matter with GIS. I'm thrilled, and I've been doing it now for just about 2 years. It's wonderful. I'm humbled to be able to help focus the studies of other students who are now taking the same path that I am, and I just couldn't be more thrilled. So finally, I just want to thank everyone in the program, all of my instructors I've had over the last 2.5 years. Dr. Savone, you've been a wonderful advisor, and I can't say enough about the program. It's something that I've recommended to all of my friends and scientists in DNRIC, and I hope everyone can take a look at it.
Thanks so much, Mark. We're going to transition now, but I hope people have some questions brewing about how people are engaging with GI science learning at a distance in various forms, both from Laura's perspective as starting a resident program and then having to balance all these work-life needs while conducting your research, and in Mark's case, being almost at this point a lifelong telecommuter, continuing to advance his career online. There's a lot of different modalities happening right now, and I think that's important for us to reflect on. I think at this point, Diana is going to try to kick it over to Justine Blanford, who I think is joining us on the phone now and is our actual supposed host for this webinar. So let's give that a shot. And,
that's right. Justine, I've enabled, or I've unmuted you on the attendee side of things if you want to try to speak to the group. You might have, you're controlling your own muting on the attendee side. There we go. Oh, there. Try it. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes. Welcome.
Yay.
Welcome from the Netherlands.
Sorry, there might be an echo here. Right.
No,
I hope everyone's
it's
enjoying this session so far. Thank you both, Laura and Mark, for highlighting your experiences, as well as providing some information about your different topics. So because of the coronavirus crisis, as Anthony highlighted when we first started, we kind of added on a little bit more to this session too, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we do, Anthony's going to give a bit of an overview on online education, and then we will talk about reflections on supervising and then have more questions. And on that, I'll hand it over to you, Anthony.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to go very quickly just to provide maybe a 30,000-foot view about online learning, what we do at Penn State, which many of you already know about, as I see attendees list in the chat rooms, a lot of familiar faces and some that are not so. So this will hopefully provide a chance to prompt some discussion, given the fact that so many places have suddenly had to transition residential programs online. I'm speaking here from the perspective of a program that is designed to be completely online, as I see quite a few of my colleagues here also have that perspective. We offer quite a bit of options at this point, ranging GIS, GeoInt, remote sensing. You heard about the programming related stuff that Mark was taking, and we're launching a Master of Science in Spatial Data Science actually as we speak. Since We've been doing this for a long time now, so it's kind of weird to be old at this, especially at a university where not everybody is familiar with this mode of learning. We've taught about 7,000 people on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. We've had some students there who are doing their studies from McMurdo. People are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. So Angie Chang, shown here, worked at Amnesty International, International Red Cross as well. Before doing her degree with us, came from a political science background. I think thinking of stories like hers and Gus Wright, another one of our students who is serving in the Army actively and looking to transition into a geospatial software development career, like these are the students that we are most normally used to working with in programs like ours. Mark is another perfect example. So the current moment right now, focusing on the resident use case with 18 and 22-year-olds is quite a bit different, and we're supporting our resident program colleagues, but we really have a very different view of the world in terms of trying to expand who learns about spatial data science. Another thing that I think is crucial in this, and a lot of us have figured this out firsthand possibly in this last semester, is that you can't just flip a switch and go online. So I think a real important aspect of success in online learning is actually engaging with online pedagogy. One thing we do here is every single course is developed as a team effort between a learning designer, someone with a graduate degree in learning design, and one of our faculty members. So we don't just record PowerPoints and put them online. That's what you do in tactical emergency online learning. That's not actually based on best practices or knowledge in the discipline. So I think there's going to be a tension going forward if people had these sort of emergency experiences versus what's possible with taking time and investing in proper online learning. We teach about 30 different classes a year now, lots of different technologies, 10-week sessions, as Mark just highlighted. One question we get a lot about is about how do you get software to people? Generally speaking, we are able to get vendors to give us stuff for our students to use for free, and that's really what I prefer. We do quite a bit of open source stuff at the moment, and it's all mixed throughout. The part that probably you're more interested in is what are we doing with coronavirus related stuff. From the online program perspective, where I oversee things, really focusing on supporting our students and faculty. We have people all over the world taking our classes who need help in various ways. There was an alternative grading scheme enabled here at Penn State that's helped some people in the near term. I would say the vast majority of our students, however, finished their spring classes as usual, which was a really cool surprise. And some of our students and faculty are actively involved in response efforts. So this is a wrinkle that isn't often considered maybe in the resident program use case where we have younger folks who aren't mid-career. Virtually all of our students and our faculty as well are active in the profession. And so they're getting called up to the National Guard. They're responding in various ways, and so we really need to be responsive to that. Our enrollments have actually trended higher. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop and for that to change, but that's been the story so far. We had the largest summer enrollment in quite a few years, and fall is very strong so far. Another thing I'll mention very quickly is that we've had open educational resources for a long time. Many of our classes have large parts of them as OER. We did not foresee that as being something that would help us with resilience as a community, and I think that's an interesting opportunity for UCGIS to pursue going forward potentially. Looking ahead, some prompts I would have for discussion here would be, an overarching message, I guess, especially reflecting on the events of the last week or so, would be that we have a long ways to go in terms of improving the diversity of our faculty, staff, and students. We don't, at least at Penn State, we are certainly not representative of the world in that sense, and we got to really work on that. I really am grateful for some policies that have been made flexible by the grad school here and the registrar. I still think we have work to do on that front too. We got to get smarter about how we allow people to flex and move to different semesters when they're interrupted at work, things that impact people in their mid-career, like you just heard about lots of different constraints that Mark and Laura went through. The cost of tuition is way too high, and I don't have anything to do with that, and most of us in academic programs don't have a lot of influence on that, and this is, of course, from the US perspective. I think a challenge, especially going forward, is going to be reinvestment in things like this. How do you maintain better quality course content, advancing pedagogy, evolving the programs, especially in resource-constrained environments, which all of us are now facing? I think one way that we can improve the overall picture of what we do is amplifying our alumni stories. And one thing we do at Penn State that I think has helped us a lot is engaging an advisory board of professionals, alums, people that we aspire to be like. We listen to them every year. We get together and do that. And I think that's a really crucial aspect of our success in staying relevant. I think also there's a career angle here that we've got to get around, which is that I think it's very likely that we're going to have more competition than ever for fewer geospatial jobs. I hope I'm wrong about that, but that's just, 20% unemployment is going to do that. And we're going to need to get creative about how to leverage things like alumni, career services, and organizations like UCGIS to really maximize the return on investment for our students. So that's what I had to share today on my part. And I think now we're going to go over to Guido for a quick discussion about what it's like to supervise at a distance. Does that sound good?
Yes. Well, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. It's very special. First of all, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Laura, for the very nice words you said about me. They're very greatly appreciated. I don't know if you know, but you do have something in common. I've been at Penn State for 6 years, and Laura, you are PhD student number 6, and Mark, you are online student number 6. So I just thought it was quite a coincidence. I mean, it wasn't planned that way, but I was just going down the list, and I just realized that there is a very strange coincidence. So personally, I think that advising an online student and advising a resident student has been quite different up until now. Not so much for the last 2 months. Of course, with Laura, we had, especially in the beginning, I would say daily interaction. And then, of course, they eased off a little bit, later on into the program. And in a certain sense, Mark, we also did the same. If you think about it, in the beginning, we were meeting, more often because that's when we were trying, to define the problem. And then, like later on, we were meeting when it was needed, about once per week. But I feel that in the beginning, we were actually communicating perhaps more often, both synchronously and asynchronously through email. With regard to Mark, I think that one thing that was fundamental was for you visiting the lab. So even though it was really an online program, I think it was in mid to late September, Mark visited the lab, he met everyone in the team. And it happened that he visited when Laura was doing the dry run of her PhD dissertation. So you could get a little bit of a sense of what the research was that you ended up, taking over in a certain sense for at least one aspect of it. And also, what, to get a sense of presentations and, the kind of relationship that, we had in the lab. As far as difficulties, I think we overcame a lot of those difficulties on that day because setting up the system, that's definitely complex. It's something that I found it to be very hard to do remotely. Just this ability to sit side by side and to walk, through the potential errors that they always end up popping up. There's no matter how user-friendly we try to make the installation of our software, we have to recognize those are not production software. Those are like prototypes, and there are so many different systems that there are always some issues that we try to smooth, but never so perfectly. I'm extremely proud of your achievements, both at the PhD level and the master level. Something that both of you mentioned about publications. I think that this is absolutely paramount. It's a strength of our program, whether it's resident or online. We want our student to publish because that is the way to get the work known. That means good benefits for you and also for us, so that the reputation of the university is recognized widely by the internet, by the scientific community. And I'm not sure what else to add. I don't think we had problems. There were some challenges because of the distance. In our case, we were lucky because for the most part, we were all in the same time zone, or, we were just 2 hours apart at most. Maybe one thing I would mention that, even when Laura was at NCAR, I did visit, I think a couple of times, right? Once for over a month. So even though it was remote, we were able to spend, quite a bit of time working side by side. And, but to go back to something that Anthony was saying, some of our students, are literally all over the world. And in the past, I was supervising a student who was deployed in Afghanistan. And that was, I don't remember, 11 or 12 hours time change. That was challenging. Also because I was traveling at that time. So, every time I was also in a different time zone. But I didn't have this problem. Okay, that's what I have.
Thanks a lot, Guido. So we've got plenty of time now for some questions, or at least we have 10 minutes, not a lot of time. So yeah, as Diana is saying, I think it looks like there's a question space for folks in the audience to submit stuff for any of the panelists today. Questions about experiences in doing research at a distance, about the projects themselves from Mark and Laura, experiences we're having dealing with various forms of distance learning right now, and supervising folks at a distance as well.
Yeah, we've got, thank you, Anthony. Thanks to all of the panelists for these really interesting perspectives. I know that there's a lot of interest in the COVID-related things, and UCGIS plans to put together some additional programming in the coming months just related to particular needs, teaching needs related or that have been affected by COVID. We have a question that's come in about, for anyone, if they can speak to the idea of doing graduate level field survey research in an online environment.
Laura, do you want to take that?
So as a part of the work that I didn't have any field work, but for my job, I had a significant amount of field work in the earlier years that I was up at Penn State. One summer I had 6 different trips to 6 different locations and a lot of equipment to move. I can say that our office now is handling it where they have put a stop, and a number of projects actually are not allowed to go out and do their field work. They're just now starting to ease that up and figure out what the procedures will be. Obviously, people will be wearing masks, but there's a lot of other questions to be answered, and I think our organization is figuring that out as we go forward. Everything you guys learn will be helpful to us too, so, and anything we learn, vice versa.
Yeah, I know. I mean, probably everybody on the call who's affiliated with university has various forms of evolving research ramp up. We certainly have those here at Penn State, and it's taking a while to figure out how this is going to start in some fashion. And obviously it's a huge concern for people, especially working in human subjects work, where interviewing and being close to someone is crucial. So it's going to impact different types of research in GIS science in different ways.
Any other panelists want to comment on the complexities of the field component for online students?
So this is Justine here. So we've had a number of students in the online MGIS program who have done various pieces of field work, and we do recommend that they do the IRB training so that they're familiar with that. And make sure that they do things appropriately, and then they work with their supervisors to develop whatever field surveys or online surveys that they need to do to collect data. There haven't been issues with that pre-coronavirus, obviously, and we'll see, I guess, how these things evolve over time. But generally, I think it works. It has worked rather well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we've had multiple opportunities where students have been able to do something that actually complements on-campus research at a distance, and so it's been really there are a lot of new possibilities that are afforded by that.
Great. Now the questions are starting to roll in. All right. Just I want to make sure people know, if we don't get a chance to respond to all of these during their time that we have, we'll collect all the questions and we'll gather responses from the panelists and send them back in written form to everyone. Maybe you could comment. Obviously, Penn State's been supporting online education for many, many years now, but maybe you could comment about the practices that you have, the infrastructure that's in place for using remote desktop for software versus having the students install things locally. What's your general programmatic activities around that?
Yeah, you know, we haven't designed a lot of elements in the completely online programs to rely on remote desktop per se. It's a much more common thing for providing web access to lab machines for resident undergraduates. And so the big change that had to happen pretty quickly, which I'm really happy to say our IT did an amazing job with this, was to make ArcGIS Pro available via the web apps, which is our version of remote desktop at Penn State. We really do our best, and it seems to work better for our students to have direct access to installing whatever they need locally for the completely online programs by design. There are in our cloud and server class and other courses that use cloud computing and enterprise technology, server-sided stuff. Then there's Amazon. There's plenty of other things too where we're using virtual services of various kinds. So it depends a lot on what you're trying to do. We're also in a different circumstance than a lot of resident programs in that we're dealing with adult professionals taking a graduate program. So there's a different set of expectations around understanding technology and how that works versus working with an 18-year-old. Frankly, a lot of our undergraduates on campus need a lot of help with very basic computing stuff. And I'll leave it at that.
I imagine that others on the call have had similar experiences.
Yeah. I can just second what Anthony says. You know, from the telecommuting perspective of my day job, I remote into a server an hour away, and it's a complete replacement of the desktop. I have not needed and not experienced that in any way with my courses at Penn State. As Anthony said, everything is either downloadable or it's web accessible. I have nearly every single program I've used during my MGIS career on this laptop, and I use a lot of them still. I've never once had to remote in. I've had the opportunity to use I'll say a higher end computer for some of the computational needs I needed with my project, but I can say with a lot of confidence that there's no or little remote desktop needs. Everything can be downloaded and used locally to satisfy the MGIS for the most part.
Okay, I think we've got time for this one last question, and again, we'll respond to the others after the session. But I know one of the challenging things for everybody who did have to shift to online in a very exaggerated, rapid way has to do with academic integrity, because it wasn't something that had been thought through in ways that people with more experience over the years have done it. So do you have any comments, any of the group, on, I suppose both from the faculty and the student side, but from the faculty, how you ensure academic integrity in online student submissions?
So we use a variety of tools to help with that. I would say start off though by saying that teaching graduate courses in a graduate program, there are just a lot fewer opportunities to do that. The assessment types are not easy to replicate from someone else, and and also with adult learners, I would say, I mean, I teach across both spectra, and we have extremely few cases of that compared to the resident program experience with undergrads. It's just a very different world. And teaching a gen ed freshman class on campus, I have to be much more careful. We actually discontinued the use of e-portfolios though quite a few years ago, because the temptation to Google and find an assignment was there for that, and we discovered those. It comes up, one of the tricky areas that we teach around, and which our programming faculty really work a lot on, is how you deal with code snippets. So when you're teaching about Python or R or something else like that, like there reusability and building off of previous work is part of that workflow. So it's quite difficult to design assignments that ensure that there's unique work happening on behalf of the student while also taking advantage of an affordance of the thing. So I think that's one area in which probably an entire webinar can focus on, where it may be more unique to graduate level stuff, but replicating work in that field can be tricky to navigate when it comes to academic integrity.
Any final comments about that from Justine or Guido or anyone else?
I think just what Anthony highlighted is that the assessments in the online program require the student to put in a lot of their own unique time and effort, because they're doing individual projects and things and have to demonstrate that they understand the material. So it is very difficult to just copy an existing assignment. And after, if you've taught the course a number of times, you start to see similarities and stuff, and can start to pick out something that might have already passed through, or see where somebody hasn't put enough thought or effort into something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it will be a topic that we'll be thinking about in the summer when we start designing some additional programming for people to be able to join related to the online teaching and learning activities that so many of us are going to be facing.
Yeah.
I would like to thank the panelists, everyone who, for their flexibility and willingness to jump into this and to handle all the different technology connections that we're doing right now. I want to thank all of the attendees for this. The session has been recorded and we'll make it available in the next couple of days. Anthony mentioned the word replicability, and that reminded me of tomorrow's session as part of our symposium. This has to do with scientific reproducibility and replicability, and we've got a whole session that talks about that important topic with regards to the GI science domain. We also have another session starting in about half an hour that is hosted by our education committee in general. And in that, during that session, you'll find a link to register for it on our website. There'll be some specific conversations and discussions around teaching and learning in this post-COVID world. So again, thanks everyone. Thanks all of you. Thanks Justine for organizing this, and everyone else here stateside for joining in. On behalf of UCGIS, this is Diana Sinton signing off. Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.